Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Preach with Peach podcast. My name's Jack Peach, and I'm your host today. And today I've got with me a good friend, a longtime friend from Twitter, which is Mr. Fury, Jeff Fury. And if you don't know, Fury is, I would consider him a bit of a flaneur, which is maybe something we'll talk about in a moment. He's a writer, he's a mindfulness coach. He's a man of many flavors and many talents, and he's someone that I think is one of the more interesting people on Twitter, if not one of the most interesting people on Twitter. So I'm super stoked to have this opportunity to talk to him today. I'm super stoked that he's taking the time to join me today. So thanks, Fury.
Thanks so much, Jack. You and I go way back, even before we started taking our account seriously. We were talking about that pre-recording. And I just like having these conversations. So when I saw, we were just sparring back and forth about your family, that thread that you put out recently, and we got back to talking, and it's good to get full steam into this new year, 2022. So thanks for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's gonna be good fun. That's one of the things I like about Twitter. There's, and men in general, like don't have to talk for 6 months at a time, but then when the people that are right, and you just flip back in, it's like nothing changes, right? And same with my good friends from back home. I don't see them very often, the guys I grow up with, but yeah, whenever we chat, we don't chat all the time, but whenever we do, it's like hop on a video call, it's like nothing changes. They're the good ones. So
yeah, same for me, man.
Yeah. So I mentioned there, this is my perspective on you, right? This is nothing like that. I think, I've never had anyone else say this. Maybe that's because I don't look enough, or I'm not on the timeline enough. But I actually could consider you a bit of a flaneur, right? So, just for the people at home who aren't really sure, or not sure what a flaneur is,
it's more a Euro term. The word is French,
term, right?
But it's definitely not a knock on Americanized people, but those uncultured barbarians, they would have never heard the word before, I would say.
Yeah, probably not. They're probably not reading Baudrillard. So. But it's basically, a flaneur is someone who takes pride in the aesthetic nature of life. It's considered I think it comes from France, right? It's from Paris. And it's the guy who, he takes an interest in life. He's walking around, and the way that he lives, the way he experiences life are intimately connected, right? It's the way that it's the way that he experiences life is based on this philosophy and what he views of kind of almost a, slightly hedonistic, I would say. It has got an element of hedonism to it.
Yes.
But it's a more cultured hedonism, in my opinion. And I would consider you a flaneur, and the meaning of these activities and the way that you do them are bound together. And the one that really, there's a couple of things with you where I really see this, but one of them, you're doing it right now, right? You're smoking a cigar. And with you, I get the impression you have a whole framework about cigars, right? I would guess you have the framework of how you smoke them, how you view them, almost it's like a metaphor of your almost a philosophy behind it. So am I right in saying that? Do you have what is cigar smoking to you? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, so what's funny, actually, I like the word, what you said, a cultural hedonism, or how you said how it connects intimately to your lifestyle, because we can talk about when I first started smoking a cigar, in the sense that there's a randomness element to it. So I was at Tomorrowland. It's one of the biggest EDM festivals, electronic dance music festivals on the planet. Again, that was also random. I was invited to go towards that with one of my friends that I went to Thailand with. And he's even more hedonistic than me. He's worse. But so we go to this festival, the TLDR, and I'm just waiting at this random toilet spot. My friends had to freshen up, and I had to wait. I was pretty antsy. I wanted to get going, But what's really funny about randomness and serendipity and being at the right place at the right time, if you have a certain vibe, certain people tend to gravitate towards you, right? I think I saw a tweet of yours maybe today on that. But it's that, so you're at a certain spot and things just collide. And there was a guy, he looked at me, and maybe I'm making this line up, but he said something along the lines, "You look like you smoke cigars." I had similar hairstyle back then to this, a little bit shorter, because back then I didn't tie it up, And he said, "You look like a guy who smokes cigars." I said, "I don't, but I do smoke." So I'm not as pretentious to say I only smoke cigars. I have smoked cigarettes. That's also where my origin comes from. But then he said, "Yo, man, I hate this thing. It's disgusting. I cannot finish it." And there was a pretty big cigar. I'd never seen a cigar like right in front of me, because I might have thought it was only for the elite. I've come back on that as well. So there's a philosophy behind that as well. But he said, "I don't like the taste of it. You can have it." But it didn't have a label, and I said, "Yeah, just give it to me." I'm pretty like that as well. I don't put things on a pedestal. I don't. So there's a nuance to it. Things are important, but things are not that important. So I just said, "Give it to me. It's free shit." It's my immigrant background. I think I like free shit. So I take it, and I just start smoking it. And for me, what first hit me was its strength. I'm a person who likes things that is stronger. That's why I don't like beer. Not per se of the bloatedness or the bad hangovers you get from it. It's just weak. It's lame. You get more bang for buck with whiskey because of the 40% ABV, the alcohol percentage per bottle. I like things that are stronger because of my cerebral nature and the way how do I say, I have a very inhibited brain. I need more stimuli to get a kick, and that tends to the flaneurism and the hedonistic side of myself. And thus, he just gave it to me, and I just started smoking it. And then my friends came back and were like, "How the fuck did you just got a cigar? This looks fucking cool." And it became part of me a little bit like that. And then flash forward to, I went with this friend to Thailand later, and I had remembered that moment. Of course, I was a little bit indoctrinated by, like, you have these flexers on maybe money Twitter or Instagram. I'm not the first. I'm not gonna pretend that I'm the first or anything. It's just very cultural, very societal, and it's part of like male culture. What's his name? Tony Montana. In Scarface smokes Dominicans, and so I was at the layover in Dubai, one of the most pretty, like, very flex terminals on the planet, actually. And they had a nice boutique, and I saw cigars. Then I thought, this is the time, very serendipitous again. I knew it was the time. I went in, I said, "What do you have?" I had no idea back then, that's what I just do. I just asked him, "Yo, what do you have?" He says, "We have Monte Cristo, sir. People like to smoke this, very mild." I saw a packet, and back then the price shocked me a little bit. It's also, there's a tweet, or there are kinds of like tweets, like a team that says you have to upgrade your mentality, what you buy. Let's say you have to buy certain courses that are high ticket, or else you can never dare to charge that to your clients, right? You're not worth that. So for cigars, to me, are a gateway also a little bit, and a totem, like a key to understanding that are things in life that might be worth it, but cost a little bit more for your own sense of value. Once you buy it, you feel more special. So that's a side of that philosophy. And so I brought it along to Thailand, and then I had like a nice interaction with a Thai girl. Yeah, it doesn't matter, but there was a nice rooftop bar. I whipped out one of the Monte Cristos and I started smoking it in the sun. I'm more like an exotic person in the sense from my genes, where my parents are from, and it just really hit me. Everything collided perfectly in my life, and I was just contemplating and pondering and smoking that Monte Cristo, and it has never left me. And that's why it's now a part of me. It's very celebratory, very engagive, very pensive, very meditative, and I just like the flavor of it.
Yeah, this is one of the things that makes me, kind of consider you almost that Flaneurship. It's part of enjoying that life where you're just in that moment, just be part of the experience, and you've got this whole meaning, this whole story behind it. It's become incorporated in your life, which is it gains a special symbolic significance through the moments and through the story you give it, which is very, very important for people to understand as well in life. Like, the stories you tell about yourself and the stories you tell about your experience, frame them. That's when people are talking about victimhood. That's what they're doing. They're telling a story about themselves. This bad thing happened to you, and instead of just accepting it as part of the suffering of life that we go through, and accepting these things happen to people, and really, shit happens. Honestly, it just does.
Agree.
And taking that and then using it as part of your story in a good way and telling a good story out of it in your own brain, other people will tailor it, and that's it. They've made this story of their life. That one experience is what defines them, right? But we can do these, like you say, for these small things, these little experiences that become more meaningful to us.
Exactly.
And I think it's super cool.
I want to tie into that a little bit. I was walking with brother Ep.3 the other day somewhere, and I said to him, Nobody ever remembers any cigarette they ever smoked in their life. I said this because as we passed by a certain spot, he said, "Hey, this is where we smoked our first cigar together." I said, Arturo Fuente Rothschild. And he looked at me like a little bit surprised. I said, "I almost never forget a cigar if it was a special moment." So it might sound, well, in a sense, weirdly romantic or maybe stupid, in the sense that after I sleep with a certain girl, I smoke a certain cigar. And then I don't forget the girl, or it could be anything, a client win, etc., etc. And it's just this nice little neural pathway that you open up to your brain, and that's how the memory works, with association. And if you make it more special, more ritualistic with certain intent, your life can be more colorful, and well, you're living it more intensely on a day-to-day basis. You don't have to smoke a cigar every day, but well, you can never win enough, in my honest opinion. But but also when you lose, by the way, that I don't share too much because I don't want to be self-absorbed talking, especially that victimhood, especially. But
Yeah.
I turned the famous Napoleon quote a little bit around. You can never have too much champagne. In victory, you deserve it. In defeat, you need it. I say the same with cigars. And in defeat, I just sit there and just smoke my cigar and think, again, this value of the cigar, it could actually be like an expensive cigar. Let's say you just lost a fuck ton of money. I have a story about that. I can actually share that once you go a little bit further. I took a bad beat, one of my worst travel stories, actually. I've never shared that anywhere, so that's pretty personal. I'll just talk around it a little bit. But I just came off this bad beat, lost a big amount of money for me back then. Yeah, like it's big, I lost a lot of money, but to reprogram my mind, I did it. So I walked in the cigar store. I just lost that money, it's like when you lose a gamble, are you gonna stop a little bit, I walked into the humidor. I was in Estonia, the guy, I looked a little bit shabby. It looked like I couldn't afford it or something. There was something in my eyes or something. He looked at me, and I looked a little bit like disheveled, my eyes were bloodshot and stuff like that. And I look at one of the most expensive cigars on the planet. It's called Arturo Fuente Opus X. It's high quality. It's good bang for buck, to be honest, if you're more into cigars. But I'd never spoken it. I waited actually for a celebratory moment and not a defeat, so to say. But I thought, you know what, I'll buy 2 of those. I just said, give me 2 of those. One was going to be actually for my friend, after that, but I ended up smoking them both. But because it was that good. But he looked at me. So I used my card. My card declined because when you travel, like you have different cards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then it got even like, he looked at me like, can you afford this? That vibe got worse or something. It was something in his eyes. I don't know what it was. But I was like, I have another card. I paid for it. And I smoked that in defeat, so to say. And I was just like understanding, I just lost money, but you can always make more. That was understanding that, ruminating over a more potential positive trajectory,
Yeah, it's like that's how you really live with abundance, right? Like especially when it comes to money, right? This is something that I vibe with as well, because I think most people growing up, especially if you don't come from like a wealthy background, you grow up with a bad mindset towards money. And that's something that I definitely did. I was, growing up, I wasn't the poorest growing up, but I was probably lower middle class in England. But, at times in my life, my parents had to scrimp and save, and we had to I was brought up with that mindset. Okay, you try and cut corners and on everything you can, you're working out exactly. When I was a big drinker, I'm having a whiskey tonight. It's Friday night here where I am. But in the past I was a big drinker, and now I was basically sober for the past 6 months, and I started drinking again recently. It doesn't have the hold on me that it used to, once every week or two on a special occasion. But in the past it would be like, I'd be the guy who's like weighing up, okay, like what's the percentage of the alcohol and what's the price and which beer am I going to actually get the most like alcohol out of, and then like what's the deal, like this is 330 ml a bottle, how many of these gonna work out
as well. I do that same thing.
It was very ingrained in me, and it's something that I had to reprogram in my mind as I've tried to attempt to become more successful, and so far seems to be helping, is to reprogram that mindset. And like you say, like when you are not having, I'm a full-time businessman now, my income varies from month to month, right? And when I'm having those months where sometimes, you know, things aren't going as well, you haven't closed as many deals, gets to that point where you're like, man, is this the end? Is it like, has the business run its course, you know, whatever it is? And you get that the temptations come back, those old habits, those old patterns, those old neural pathways, they come back. And it's like at that point where you have to reset and say, no, I'm not gonna change the way that I'm gonna live, because there's more money comes and goes, and if it doesn't come this month, it's gonna come next month. So I'm not gonna worry about that. I'm not gonna worry about, okay, this month I'm gonna try, like, I'm not gonna eat so much steak, right? I'm gonna, you know, I live in Thailand, steak is very expensive here. It's you know, twice the price that it is in England. But I'm not going to suddenly stop that and start eating chicken because of, you know, a few client set calls didn't, you know, a few calls didn't go through. Like, and then the next month is when you have the best month ever. Like, that's just how it goes, you know. And being able to do that, having that abundance mindset is very easy when things are going well, right? But when things are going bad, and having these little habits, these little patterns, very important. Same with women, by the way. Like, the reason that guys get desperate and get needy is because they're in that scarcity mindset, right? They're not acting out of abundance with women. They believe that there's no woman coming. So any woman they can get at that point, they desperately cling to, and will often enter into bad relationships as a result. Big thing I'll do with my clients is tell them, you know, don't, just because nothing's happening, you can maybe get some practice in and practice a few things we talk about, but, you know, don't settle. Always maintain your standards, whether things are going well, whether things are going badly. You have to have standards by which you live your life. And by maintaining those standards is how you attain those standards in your life. You attain the things you want by living as though those standards are going to come true. And it sounds so hippie-ish, you know, it's like just positive mindset, man. And obviously you still have to work, right? You can't just have that mindset. And, you know, I'm a Christian, so I believe you should pray as well. But I do believe, you know, God rewards people who are living in alignment. You know, your prayers and your actions have to be aligned. That's when he's going to give you, that's when he's going to answer your prayers in the way you want. God always answers your prayers.
It's that famous.
But sometimes he says no.
It's only like God only helps those who help themselves.
Yes.
You know? If you're not working towards it, you know, I'm not, I am Christian, by the way. So if people want to hear that, but I wasn't raised religiously, so I haven't gotten the faith and stuff like that. But definitely what you said too, I wouldn't say like I have, how would I say, like hyperinflated egocentrical standards, but I'm lucky enough that I have this thing that I never settle. So I could be down in the dumps, down in the dirts, money-wise, women-wise, you know, I'm just a human. But when push comes to shove, when I feel it, when push comes to shove, I don't back down. There's just something in me, and people would say that that's why I, you know, have character and stuff like that. Maybe I have that very epigenetically from my father, I would say. He is like that as well. He's very principled, and I would say like if he was, you know, brought up more in the modern world, just like me, he would have been a little bit like me. But it's not about him. But it's more like especially with relationship. You know, I was seeing this girl last year, but I cut it off because there were some things I could not see through the fingers, and it would never go away. And it's just how do I say this? I'm not going to say I'm never going to marry, but my point is more, I would never become one of those kind of like, this is a Reddit story waiting to happen. I don't know if you see them on the timeline, like 10 years later you got cucked and none of your kids are yours or something, you know. Or it's not about that, it's always single mom's fault. I can imagine a guy going with a single mom or something, but I don't know, like how do you call this, like acknowledging the kid on the birth certificate while it's not yours, and like really stuff that I don't even have to second guess that, you know. I'm not a picky person, you know. I eat everything. If you just give me a beer at a cafe or something, I'll just take it. And I'm very pragmatic, but with certain things, I'll be like, yo, that's not gonna happen. You know, that's, you know, something stops me. And I think some men, I don't know, they need to be taught that, or they need to see these narratives of other guys, you know, inspirations and stuff like that. It's fine. You know, we all have to learn it. And I learned it all the hard way, of course, you know. And
the best way to learn it, though, is the hard way, to be honest.
The best way is to learn it the hard way.
Unfortunately, true. It's the same, you know. Again, it's another thing that happens very, 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 very often, you know, like you can give someone advice, you can tell them, you can see that, you know, as someone who deals with these, you know, women problems with clients all the time, you can see these patterns that emerge, and you can see very clearly, like, you know, this is not going to work, or why this is not going to work. But me saying that, I will say it, but often they have to go through that experience to realize what I'm saying and to really learn it. You know, like it's great to hear it, but when you actually go through it, and then to hear it beforehand, and then go through it and then experience that, and they, you know, that's when you really learn the lesson. You know,
it's because if you tell a kid that the stove is hot, they don't understand. They gotta be burned on the stove, then they will never do it again.
Yeah, I mean, that quite literally happened to me, but on a gas fire as a kid. Yeah, for sure. It's just part of that life experience, and it's also worth remembering that you're gonna get burned a few times, you know, in life. You mentioned earlier, you know, you lost a lot of money one time. These things happen, you know. These things happen. Sometimes you go through a bad relationship, which is really, really tough, and it hurts a lot. And but you need that experience. That happened to me before I found my now wife. Before that, the only other woman I've really dated seriously was crazy, you know, to put it mildly. So, and it was a learning experience. I wouldn't, for a long time, I would have changed it. And a long time, I would have changed my old habits, my drinking habits and stuff. But now I realize that that's just part of what made me who I am today. And if I hadn't gone through that experience, even though it probably had some perhaps lasting effects on my health and stuff, it was worth it, because I'm sure you can relate to this. You learn a lot when you've been in some shady dive bars at 6 a.m. in the morning, and you see the worst of humanity. You learn a lot of lessons.
I kid you not. Like, so there's this book called Power versus Force by David Hawkins, or same concept in the book, or same concepts in Frederick Dodson's Energy Levels. If people want to pick this book up, it's about energy levels and frequency. It goes from 0 to 1,000, and if you want to be Jesus Christ, well, you can be Jesus Christ, but he has power level 1,000 or something. But they're like ghouls at 0 to 50. And tying into this dive bar, I kid you not, I've been to these places, and they look like there's something demonic about them. Like, there's no other word to describe it. We can talk about like
even the aesthetic.
Oh, sorry?
Even the aesthetics of them.
Yes,
often.
In a very, like, how they manifest themselves, you know, in a very more earthly fashion. But you just look at them and you just see like a demon or a ghoul or a goblin in their eyes. You just make eye contact, and it's like, maybe I should leave or not come back here, or, you know, or don't talk to those people while you're still there. But definitely something to be wary of, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, they're always underground as well. They're always in basements, and it's, you know,
that's true.
Yeah, it's a psychological. I don't know whether it's a psychological expression. I believe in demons. I believe in the devil. So like,
Jack, we can tie this, because why are the most spiritual gurus always on top of the mountain? Right? That's high on top.
Yeah, they're different. There are different resonations, and all the different, you know, these metaphors, if you want to call them metaphors, these
metaphors.
Yeah, these symbolic interpretations are cross-cultural, right? One of the things that always interests me is when things are cross-cultural. Now, obviously, the world has been globalized for a long time now. Like there are, you know, linguistic overlaps and stuff. We've been connected for, you know, depending on which archaeological kind of paradigm you want to follow, but at least you know, at least 2,000 years we've been pretty interconnected. 3,000 years, the world has, and there's obviously going to be some cultural overlaps there. But when you see things that are in all cultures seen as important, have some relevance, that tells me there's some truth to these experiences, whatever they are. Whether it is there's evil under the ground, right? Whether there's goblins, whether there's demons, whether there's dragons, whatever it might be, there's, you know, evil spirits. That's where hell is, underground, right? All these themes that are cross-cultural in all cultures, whether or not they take a, you know, Judeo-Christian baseline or not. You go to a tribe in Amazon, they still will have this same kind of belief system that under the ground is where the evil things are.
Yeah, that's
and
pretty
as you say,
interesting.
up above is high. It's also one of the reasons why I think marriage is so important, because
Mhm.
in all societies all over the world, hunter-gatherer societies, and they don't always manifest in the same way. You do get
Mhm.
polygamous societies. You do have societies where divorce is more common, even in hunter-gatherer tribes, etc. But all of them have this ceremony, this marriage ceremony, where two people, a man and a woman, bind themselves together and create, a new existence together.
Yeah,
And that tells me that there's just something that is human about that. Obviously,
this is very
go
human.
back, yeah, it's just a human experience. This bonding of two people.
It
A
reminds
man
me
and a
actually.
woman.
Well, I wouldn't say humans are like animals, but there's this story. I don't know if it's true that the emperor penguin, when he does engage. He mates monogamously for life, certain species, to his penguin like a wife for life. He goes. What does he do? He goes on a quest to find the perfect pebble and brings it back, almost like an engagement ring to start the ceremony. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that sounds very human, or a human sounds very much like an animal, And these overlaps are everywhere once you have the awareness of it.
Yeah, once you're open to experiencing it, which is part of the importance. And one of the interesting things about travel is when you do get your eyes opened up to these things. So on that point, then, like, let's have a little transitions. Nice little segue. You mentioned earlier your time in Thailand. Now, you've wrote about this on your Twitter. I think you've wrote about it on your blog as well. And for people that don't know, I live in Thailand. I've lived here for the past 4.5 years. So
the land of the smiles.
The land of smiles, exactly. And yeah, I wanna hear a bit about your experience, because there's two Thailands, right? There's two different experiences of Thailand that people tend to have. There is the more, Thailand's a very hedonistic culture, partying. They very much lent into that. Sex tourism is a real thing here, whether or not, just the sex trade in general. It's like, it's not just tourists that engage in it, believe me. It's a very culturally acceptable thing here for whatever reason. I'm not 100% sure why. But I'm curious. What was your experience of Thailand? What did you find about the place? What I think Thailand's where the quadka came from, right? Is that correct?
It's where it came from. So we'll get into that. But so why it resonated for me in general as a vibe, it's because my parents come from an exotic country, and my genes are from Southeast Asia. To disclose that. And so the second I stepped off the plane, the door opens. There's this whiff. And when the whiff came in, it was very Proustian, like the mandolin cookie effect. I smelled this whiff, and it was an amalgam of, it's like burnt tarmac because of the sun and this humidity. And it I would say, because I believe in epigenetics and expressing your genes in certain environments, it unlocked something in me. So from the second, I knew I was going to have a good time. It sounds very strange, but I just felt right. And so definitely climate-wise, I love that kind of style. And I quickly find out that it was exactly, like where my parents come from. It's like a banana republic, I call that. So the rich are really rich and the poor are dirt poor as hell. And there's a side of me that grew up like with Wild Wild West movies. And I equate these kind of countries to Wild Wild West. What I mean by that, it's almost like anything goes if you have the power, of course. If you're the sheriff in town, if you have the guns and whatever. Same applies here. It would be if you have the money then. Or well, at one point you're gonna come across those corrupt cops and shit like that. Then you need to have influence and power, but that's another story. But so that's what I really like actually when I go on vacation. So I don't know if I would live in Thailand, maybe the more beautiful parts, or maybe some secluded parts that nobody knows or something, and just disappear. I can see that happening as well. But it's this how do you call it, like teleportation, this transportation to another world that I really liked, that it's not there in the West. That enables me personally. It's like a platform, to tie it back like a nice little segue to the Flaneurism. It gives me a platform to basically be somebody else. And for example, I can talk about that, but it's not necessary. But I cannot do certain things that I'm able to do in the West that I was able to do there. And well, if you've been to like a degen spot like Khao San Road and like those dodgy places, it's just you can't do that in the West. It's I would say my EQ and my social intelligence isn't the best, but I can see once you're walking in a civilized Western, you can just do certain stuff. But I like that, like the all bets are off, all bets are off, kind of gung ho, kind of free spirited vibe, because well, I haven't never been back, so it's like a once in a lifetime kind of thing. And so that's what I really like. It was really cheap for the quality of the food. The first meal I ate, it was really good. It was just a simple dish with rice and beef, and they gave me chili on the side. I like my food spicy, again, because of the strength. Most shit in the Western isn't spicy. When they call it spicy, it's made for a Westerner to be spicy. I even use a different, how do you call it, vocabulary to utilize. I would even use the Scoville gradation system for peppers to categorize how spicy something is. I would say that's not spicy. That's Scoville level 50,000 or 20,000. Spicy is 100, to make it more scientific. But anyway, so I tasted that and I was like, whoa, this is like, they know their shit, and that's what I really loved as well, the food and the culture. I'm not a foodie, don't get me wrong, but if food is going to be part of your life, it should be, well, enjoyable the least, and yeah, no, the parties were good, lots of women, but it's more like, I would say, DJ and debauchery stuff. It's I would say it's even hard. Let's say you were a playboy or something, you're good with women. I would think you'd have to have good discernment to find a good long-term monogamous relationship. It can be hard, I think, but I don't have much experience like going in the long run. But there's a lot to be lived there, so to say. It's a good story collection pool, I would call it that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a lot goes on in specific areas of Thailand. It's funny, if you like all that kind of stuff, like there where I live, it's not there at all. It's not here. There's a little road. There's a road which is, it's got the gully bars and stuff that the expats go to. There's one road of it here, and it still goes on a little bit, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
On that last line about finding good partners, Thais in general are pretty what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to say that, like, they're pretty xenophobic, right? They very much look after their own. They're very patriotic, very nationalistic. They maintain their own culture, and
I want to tie into that actually. So
Thai people want to stick to themselves.
So I can disclose this side of my personality, since we're tying it to like why I am like how I am. I'd heard stories even from Asian-looking people how they got treated very xenophobically by Thai people, but for me that was not the case. In all the 24 plus countries that I've been, I lost count, but it's more than, I've been treated quite xenophobically. I don't even use the word xenophobic. I use the word tribalistically. It's not even racism. I understand in crowds and out crowds and tribes and whatever.
Yeah.
I respect that. Because again, when the cowboy rides into town, a movie's going to happen, right? They don't want him into town. So I respect that archetypical narrative of life, of myself, those archetypes in myself. But of all the places I've been to, I had the warmest welcome by Thai people, because some thought I had Thai blood in me, and it would take a conversation or interaction to find out that I wasn't Thai. And that, well, of course I'm Asian, gonna run with the benefit that I have in this case then. But it wasn't the case for me. I just had a blast, I had no hate. Yeah, well, maybe I had some hate, but that was in the expats or other tourists, but not the local Thai people, because that's actually how I rate a country actually. So I have a very intricate rating system of a country, a city that I go to, because I don't like to make things black and white that easy. That was a shit country or that was a good country. I don't do that. I have a very intricate system of pros and cons, and any place could have its charm if you just look at the right thing.
Yeah,
and any place could have its devils if you look at the other side. So, from the indigenous, local people, it was only warm. That's why I made the joke actually, the land of the smiles. I think I tied it together a little bit. That for me, it was just a beautiful time for me with the people.
For sure. I'll just add a bit of context there. When I say xenophobic, I don't mean like outwardly racist or anything. No. It's just more in general. They like to stick with their own. And once they find out like you're a foreigner, they'll be friendly, right? They're very polite. It's a very polite culture. Like, it's a face culture, so you can't lose face. So it's very important to be polite and be respectful towards people in general. But in terms of making friends with Thai people, it's very difficult. Like if you're at a party, even with like Thais and Westerners, it's like split tables. It's like you're in middle school. Well, like at primary school, it's like the girls and the boys. Like you guys are not, you're at the party, but you're not talking to each other, right? Like it's like that. But
I know
one thing I would,
a small little anecdote. So once you mentioned that, I had a little flashback actually. There was only one. So I think when there's this Taoistic concept, the Tao flow of life, the ups and downs of life. It's like a wave, and tying it to that abundance mindset, you have to catch the proper waves, like a surfer. You're surfing life.
Yeah.
But to catch the right waves, you need the eye. And I would say there was something going on in Thailand that I was like in flow, and I had this intuition that kept me steamrolling only with winds. So I avoided darkness while I was in darkness, but I just kept winning. I don't know how to explain it. I just kept winning. It was almost impossible, like a perfect sacrifice play on the chessboard, But there was one time I went to a club. It was the only time I went to this club because my friend, he was either sick, drunk too much, or he was with a girl or something. I went out by myself. He said, "Yo, Fury, check out that club. It's right beside like Khao San Road and in Bangkok." But funny thing, it was on the ground again also. But here you had very modern Thai people who were in cliques as fuck. So you had a huge dance floor. It was a huge club on the ground. It was very beautiful, cheap as fuck. Don't get me wrong. But there was they only play Thai music, but modern Thai music, like hardcore electronic.
Yeah, I know.
And holy shit, I did not have a good night that night. I forgot about that one because again, I controlled the narrative, right? I thought I was only winning, right? But no, I did not make any friends that night. Like some dumb people like step on my toes, and then they try to step on your ground, and then why did you just throw this drink on me? I said I didn't. You were just those kind of dumb shit that happens with me as well. And so yeah.
Yeah. It's I can definitely relate to that experience. That's what I mean. It's very rare you go to a place where there'll be no Western music at all, but Thailand, that's the norm. It's all they like. I've been at parties where when I used to live in my old place, me and my wife were there, and there's a group of Westerners that live there, but this is like super rural, like as in I literally the actual place I lived at this point, there was only 2 white people in the village, and we both worked at the same place, right? We're the only 2 white people, and everyone knows who we are. And then there's a town about 30 minutes away, which is still a very rural town. And it's like everything shuts at 8 p.m. It's that kind of place. And we were at a party one time.
Did you
where we stayed?
Oh, I think I read about that, bro.
Yeah, and
your email list or something.
Yeah, I talked about it one time. My email list for sure. But we were at a party listening to Western music, and this Thai girl was just like, "Yo, why are we not listening to Thai music? Like, what is this?" And they were like complaining, and then we had to switch to Thai music because it's like they just didn't want to listen to the Western stuff. It's just it's interesting. It's good in some ways because like Thai culture is very protected. It's like been in some ways it's a very global society. It's like embraced aspects of globalism really heavily while maintaining its own character really well. I
really like that.
That's why people like it there, because you can get everything like it here. I'm literally here right now. And obviously I like it. I wouldn't have lived here for 4.5 years if I didn't. But it's very, very, very interesting to see that, because you can get everything you want as a Westerner here, but it's very clear you're in Thailand and nowhere else. Even I've lived in other countries in Asia, and it's different. It's a different feel. So I want to go back to something you mentioned before, like I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes ago. You said like when you travel, it gives you almost like an opportunity to be someone else, or words to that effect. I want you to unpack that a little bit more, because that's an interesting concept and something that I think I can. Yeah, it's something that I can resonate with in one sense as well, having been traveling on my own for extended periods of time in the past.
Yeah, it definitely does something to you. So I have been unpacking this with one of my clients, the one I said who like. So you asked me a little bit about my client work. How does it go about? One guy, I would say by accident, it's very therapeutic because we dissect each other a little bit. And I've come to the conclusion that so for people that want to know a little bit about me from astrology point of view, I am a Pisces, and they say I have water magic. And most of you that adhere to like Zen Buddhism and Taoistic philosophies popularized by, for example, Bruce Lee with the "Be water, my friend." So if you're water, it means you're liquid. And once you have a liquid identity, you don't like to be trapped. That's tied again to the Flaneurism, because water is supposed to run free and clear and hard and fast, and you can equate it to creeks and rivers and huge bodies of oceans. It's beautiful, luscious, and strong water. But once you pool water in in a certain forest, where you have these small waters, and it's not running anymore, once water is not running, it gets dirty and muddy and toxic and unclean. It sounds maybe a little bit convoluted and too over philosophical, but what I mean by that, just like a human being, I have these tendencies in me that I have to run clear and free. And now this very versatile nature that I have. For example, there are only a couple hobbies that have interested me in my life, such as cigar smoking, that have entertained me for a long run. But this train everything meme that is now prevalent on our corner of Twitter, I was doing that since it was 12. I don't even have a memory of it. I was back there in the old PUA days, but because of the self-improvement part of it, actually. So I had this huge archive that I in the pirate days, I don't do those things anymore, but I have this huge archive. I have it still stored away on my hard drive, that I was reading body language, social dynamics, philosophy, as a man make it, I knew it before people were saying all these dumb shit on Twitter, and coming back to that, to find these platforms where I can facilitate to be somebody else. I don't like to be boring, I don't like to be bored. I don't like to be boring. I don't like to live a boring life. And I don't like to be just somebody. What I mean by that, I want to be a somebody, but my ego cannot, maybe it's the standard that I have. My ego cannot allow itself to be one label, one sticker. So for people who are new to my Twitter or whatever, I am trained, or how do you call this? I went to school. I graduated as an engineer, but where I come from, it's not one of the, that's a tangent. But my point is, I didn't like to be labeled as an engineer. Oh, what do you do? I'm an engineer. I stopped saying that. When they say what do you do, I just say marketing, and then I do different tactics. But my point of it is, I am not an engineer. I am not a writer. I'm not a cigar smoker. I'm not a heavy boozer. I'm not a womanizer. I'm not even Fury. I'm not even Jeff. I'm basically nothing. Some people say that from a very humble point of view. I am nothing. And what I mean by that is, I don't like to be boxed in. And I just like to find these, you could call it the signs of the times, but also the signs of the cultures, where I can see, here I can do this. And it's very instinctual that I call it story collecting mode, once I write the blog or the tweets or whatever. But I would say, to make my life more impactful, eventful, and colored for myself, tying it to the stoic / samurai Bushido deathbed scenario, that once you're on a deathbed, you don't want regrets. I have a certain thing. I have certain things that I want. Doesn't mean that I get everything that I want. Tying it back to learning the hard way, but I'm definitely not gonna be an engineer. I'm not gonna be XYZ. I can never allow that to happen. If that is true, I would have truly failed at life. That is my definition, at least, to winning and losing and success, at least, to say the least.
That's really cool, because it's actually, and I want to go back to that in a little moment as well.
Perfect.
On another topic, but I want to relate that first, because actually, I'm very much the opposite to that. One of the things I discovered during my travels is that I am a man of routine who does like routines. I like to have a way of living where it's there's a rhythm to my life, and I take pleasure in that. And I take pleasure in these ritualistic things that I do, to go back to the beginning, like you have with cigar smoking. For me, I like to drink good coffee, right? That's my connoisseurship now, that I rarely drink. I used to be a connoisseur of alcohol. I used to drink cheap stuff as well. I just used to drink whatever. Now I occasionally have a drink, but I don't drink enough to be a connoisseur, right? I will, if I drink once a week, that's a lot for me, right? So but nowadays I drink coffee every day, and I like good coffee, and I share
Very
a bit
important.
of that on my Twitter. And for me, like, I like to make a pour over coffee, a slow drip coffee. It takes me about 20 minutes, and I have a ritual behind it. And I get up in the morning, and I normally, what I do, my routine is, if I don't have a client call, I get up, I work for 2 hours before my wife and my son wake up, because it gives me some focused time to get my work done. And then when I'm done, whatever that task is in the morning, that's my time to make a coffee and have breakfast. And I make a coffee, and if my wife's already up, I make her one as well. But I have this routine about it, and then it's like I have this flow to my life that I really, really enjoy, and I enjoy these patterns of behavior. I like doing the similar things at the same time. And it was actually travel that taught me that, because when I kind of rebuilt my life, there was a time when I was very unhappy with my life. And what I decided to do was to leave. Like, I decided to change my environment. I just said, like, I'm in the same pattern of behavior. I had my patterns back then. I had the same pattern of behavior that I did all the time, and I tried to break out of it. And I would stop for 3 months, maybe even 6 months at one time, probably not that long. And then I just get pulled back into that pattern of behavior because of my environment, people I was hanging out with, my friends. I'd always lived in the same place. And I decided,
me of that demonic pattern in Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill.
It's very much so.
There's a rhythm, and the rhythm can catch you, but you're supposed to make the rhythm that's good to adhering to your aligning personality. It's good that you found it out.
That's what I've found. But it took travel to find that for me. When I went,
of course,
and you had this thing, when you're traveling, that's why I picked up on this, you're being someone else, right? It's like you can in that moment, you have this experience. Like, people have no preconceptions of you, right? That's the thing. Like, they don't know anything about you. They cannot go into it. So what they see right then is who you are and what they get. Right. And one of the interesting things about that for me is, like, I grew up in one city. I never left that city until this point, and everyone knew me in that city, on the scene. If I went out on a night out, everyone knew me. They're like, it's Jack. Like,
I can imagine that.
And when I went traveling, it was like, suddenly I didn't have this reputation that preceded me. And that was actually a very humbling moment, because what it allowed me to face was the inadequacies of who I was. Like, I didn't have this.
Of course.
Yeah, I did not have this preconceived thing. Like, everyone knew me. I was the guy. I was cool. I wasn't like the coolest guy in the world, but I was connected.
I know what you mean.
And I went traveling, and it's like, you act like this arrogant guy, like, and people are just like, yeah, who are you? Like, and that was very humbling for me, and that was a big learning experience. And during that process of travel, I changed. I'm moving every few days. No support network. No ties to the last place even. And I realized it's not for me. That life's not for me. And that's when I kind of found and rebuilt this life that actually falls into that patterns, which is why I thought it was interesting you said that, because we experience the same thing, but our personality types played it out in different ways. So it's very interesting.
It's super interesting, because while you were talking, I had multiple threads weaving in my head, actually. But for sake of, to keep this contained a little bit, I would say I'm not a Taoist person, but I've read a lot about those things. And there's a season for everything. What I mean by that is I truly believe that, because I'm really good with my routines as well. For example, I cannot go a day without moving. I need to have my 15-minute walk, or else I'll go fucking crazy. While I was in Thailand, I swam every day in that, pool. I used their gym. I party hard, and the booze makes me wake up early. It's this thing that I have in my brain. I went to the gym in the fucking hot, steaming. I didn't put on the air conditioning. I never do that. It's extra sauna. But I need mobility, and I have certain things in my routine that I have to have, or I implode on myself, I call it. So there's that, definitely. And I try to get that in my traveling routine, because you adhere or introduce a little bit of chaos, right? A little bit of novelty, but in the novelty, I do the same shit sometimes. So for example, I have this tick now. When I travel, I completely go in blank. I almost Google 0.0 for the sake of the story. So I was where was I? Like Stockholm. I was like, oh, I don't know where anything is. And I just walk, and then I discover, that's part of that personality trait. But however, I had Googled the cigar shops, steak houses. Those are the only two things that I Google, or where to get booze, and party a little bit. But my point of that is that everything has a season, because this routine and stuff like that. When I was because I'm a storytelling person, and I was fed and grew up with books and movies, that the white picket fence metaphor, or this almost, well, for me it's almost an illusion, but I can see some people have long-term committed relationships, but it was never there for me actually. My point is that to go with the flow of life a little bit, so understand maybe this season will come, or maybe it will never come. There's a solace in that, or a peace, or a patience that you quote unquote struggle with on a daily basis because of programming and comparison behavior, over comparing. And deep down, there's this Shakespeare quote that I always quote. What is it? There's no desire as common as the desire to be uncommon, And so, how do I say this? Almost reflexively or lashing out. If I couldn't be normal, so to say, how I viewed the things that I quote unquote needed to have this checklist to be normal. I never was normal then in that sense. Some people would maybe say like quirky or weird or strange, very extravagant, larger than life. It's because normal was never given to me.
We would say eccentric in England.
Yeah. Oh yeah, eccentric. That was the word I was looking for. It was never given to me, and then I lash out. That's part of my personality, very explosive in that sense. Then I'll think, okay, fuck it. It's this metaphor that I have like on the chessboard. So on the chessboard, you have to build the army up from one side to the other side. And once you're in play, you can choose, it's a choice, to play it positionally and slowly pressurize and swamp and checkmate and destroy. But I have this tendency, once I see something, I get, it's this thing. I lash out and I just destroy it. What I mean by that, the pieces just go in and it's like an explosion. And I have the same thing, this lashing out effect, because it's like a metaphor to life, that okay, I see these things going, fuck it, I just put the pressure in it and just go with it. For example, I didn't see the 9 to 5 going for me well, I just explode into it and fuck that shit. And then when people say, so you're saying you're not going back to the 9 to 5? No, it's not that the bridge is burned. I still have my diploma, I can still go back, create like a track record, bump up your CV. But it's like the pieces got exchanged, especially the sacrifice was made. They're coming back to like learning life the hard way. Certain sacrifices were made by me personally, that the time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears was invested in a certain ways that opened up space and lessons in my brain. It triggered, catalyzed certain lessons in my brain. I cannot unlearn that unless I were to have a very reprogramming ego death and I destroy every programming in my brain. Fringe science is out there, but I cannot unlearn certain stuff that I have, and I still try to balance it out. Like there's a season for everything.
Yeah, it's that concept, that kind of metaphor of the seasons of life is something that I came across recently, actually, within my church, where I think it's a very Christian idea. People often talk about the season that you're going through. I think it's a very important thing, and I'm going to talk about it in a slightly different way from the way that you were framing it there. But it's like, because if we go, like, I'm going to use my own life. Like in my own life, I grew up, went to school, and then I had this hardcore party stage for about 8 years or so, from about 14 onwards. And it was a season of my life, right? And then I grew out of it. I realized this was not taking me anymore, and I moved on to a different season. I went traveling, and I had a kind of rebuilding stage. And then I met my now wife, and now I've got a kid, right? Which is a completely different season of my life compared to the past. Like, you have to make a lot of compromises when you have children. And like, all these stages are parts of our life that I believe should necessitate coming to an end, right? I'm a father at the moment with a dependent child, and obviously my child is disabled, so I have some extra considerations there. But there will come a point where I will no longer be taking care of dependent children, right? I'm not going to be, I'll always be a father, but I'll never be the father who the kids have to rely on forever, right? That's another season. One of the things I think we've got, the problems in our society is that people have one season on their life and they think that's it, right? So you get people like I'm afraid I'm going to talk about some of my old friends here as well, unfortunately, who are still at the same stage that I was at, 5 years ago when I stopped drinking, stopped partying, that they're still in that season for life. And there seems to be no slowing down, no shifting from it. It's like, this is it. This is like, I don't want to make any sacrifices in any other areas of my life because I want to keep in this season. And this is it. This is what life's about, right? And you see it as well with women who don't want to have children, or men who don't want to have children as well, for that matter. It's like they've got to this point in life where they've got independence. They're independent from their parents now. They're financially independent. They can spend money and they have time, high time preference. They can use their time for what they want. And they think this is it, right? This is what life's about. This period, which I believe should be from 20 to maybe 25, maybe 26. You can probably extend it out a little bit longer if you're a man, but it should be that point of life where this season where you do have that freedom to go and do these things we're talking about, experiment, experience new things. But there comes a point where you have to, like, from my perspective, you have to exit that season and move into a new season of life. And I think a big problem with our culture is that people don't want to leave one season for the next season. They see that adolescence or the early adulthood stage of life as being the pinnacle of life, and they don't want to move past that pinnacle. They don't want to lose what they perceive as the pinnacle is. Whereas every season has its beauty and every season has its great joy. Today, my parents are out here in Thailand at the moment. They flew out for the birth of their grandson, my son, and we were talking about this exact same thing today when we were drinking coffee. And I was saying, like, you guys are, getting older, you're now grandparents, but this is a season of your life as grandparents and it has every bit as much beauty. And you can see that, my mom loves playing with my son. It's like she just dotes on him. She just wants to go see him, spend as much time as possible with him, and it's like, there's this season of life where she's getting great joy out of that. Whereas our modern society seems to argue that, when you're old, you're kind of done. You have nothing to offer. There's nothing fun left in life. There's no more, you've done everything you need to. And it's a really, really bad and twisted way of looking at the world because it keeps you living in the past, number one, and never keeps you in what the reality of the situation is. Like, we all get old. We all have these stages of life. And if you enjoy each stage and each season as it comes, you're going to have a greater experience of life. And different ages, people, like, it doesn't have to be like a hard cutoff. Like, obviously it's not like 28, you're done, you need to move on. Everyone goes through it at different stages, and each season will be different for each person as well. And I think different archetypes, personality archetypes lean into different things. But I just think it's a very important concept. That's a really great metaphor that has been lost in society. So I think even though you're talking about it in a slightly different way, I think it's an interesting thing.
Now, I definitely meant it like that as well, because there's a certain, almost like a sage level wisdom and maturity that comes with it. This not resting on your laurels, your past glory, I only when asked, I talk about how I used to run a marathon. I don't do that shit anymore. It's over. And it's nice. It gives a sense of pride to see what you're physically, mentally, and spiritually capable of. But it's just a benchmark of memory, it's nothing more. It's not me. I didn't go.
You are, right?
I didn't go further with it, for example, but I can relate definitely. There's definitely something highly sus about people who don't want to have children, even as a guy, not even a woman, but also the onus can be on the guys as well. There's something slightly off with them as well, because as quote unquote God intended, that you're meant for procreation. It's supposed to get, I always talk about like expression. It's almost like one day you wake up and it could be a voice or a thought or whatever, no matter how you think, but something should be like, I should get a new job or get a promotion or maybe switch girlfriends, I don't know, or maybe have a kid. Point is that there should be this timing in everything, as Musashi would say, that you're supposed to be aware of, listen to the music of life. I really like the metaphor of music.
I like that metaphor as well. Yeah.
That, what is it? I think, but this was Nietzsche, I think. There's no purpose sometimes of a song other than that it has to begin, has a middle, and that it has ended. That was the purpose of the song. And if you would say like your whole life is like a whole symphony, it has these pieces and songs. It's supposed to end and maybe that's not bad, but people love to have to stretch it out, but the
Yeah.
song won't be any more beautiful. It's supposed to end, and then the next song, and on, and just play the music, just go with, flow with life.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like I think I got a tweet scheduled up along those lines, like people would rather live forever and be miserable than to die at peace. Like I really think that that's the case. And life is defined by death. Like I don't get any of this, transhumanism thing, this uploading your brain to the consciousness. Like for me, it's super demonic. I think I wrote a blog article about this. It's an erosion of nature's law. It's an erosion of God's law. It's an erosion of the exaltation of self and of pleasure above all else, above all meaning. Because all these people who want to live forever, for example, just to use the example, Jeffrey Epstein was a big funder of transhumanist technology. A lot of these people who are investing in these things tend to be highly hedonistic people who want to go through life just experiencing sexual pleasures or drugs or whatever it might be, these sensory pleasures, which, by the way, I'm not a Puritan, right? I'm drinking whiskey while we talk this. Like I think you should enjoy the experiences of life, but it shouldn't be that's what you live for, right? Like that should be part of the color of life, not the meaning of life, if that makes sense. But a lot of this focus on wanting to extend life, at the point when death is erased, life no longer exists. Life is defined by death. The fact that it comes to an end is what makes this beautiful. And obviously, if you have, religious belief, you believe that there's life after death, and you enter this new spirit of consciousness, which is going to be a whole different experience, right? But that's a different thing. That's the other thing about transhumanism. It's an essential part of trying to make humans God. That's you can't trust in. It's you can't trust in God to provide eternal life. You have to find it for yourself. It is literally the ego taking superseding all else. So I'm not into any of that life extension stuff. Any of that.
That's pretty interesting. That's a damn rabbit hole to go into, man.
Yeah.
That's it. I really like those rabbit holes that you bring me into. It's good shit. I'll keep an eye on that. Yeah.
I tweet about relationships, but there's more going on behind the
yeah, I like that about you, Jack.
Stuff. Yeah. So I want to segue now, because one of the things we mentioned earlier, and I think it links as well to this idea of the Taoist water thing we talked about. It kind of fits into this theme that we picked up on. This seems to be the theme of this podcast. And it's about kind of your view on literature, your view on writing. You've mentioned it a little bit before. You see your life as almost like a story, or these parts of your life maybe as story collecting exercises, I think you said, or words to that effect. And I'm kind of interested, about your methodology behind writing. I think you're a big fan of Ernest Hemingway. I'm correct in saying that, right?
Yeah, I like him. I read most of his, very pretentious, very snobbish. Like I said, I read enough of him that I'm on his lesser works now, his lesser known works. So I read a lot about him. Yeah,
that's good. So I think, obviously Hemingway is well known for being, a hard drinker and having that very, unusual lifestyle. And there is a theme and a motive amongst many great writers who were, alcoholics, or
yes, of course,
alcoholics, but big drinkers, heavy drinkers is probably a better way of putting it, perhaps. And I'm just curious about, again, if we go back to this Flaneurism, what is this philosophy you have on writing? Because I see this in the way you write. You have a very unique voice, a very unique style. It's something that I really, really, I think is one of the things that attracts people to you, is the way that you do, you do have this greater, deeper philosophy behind the way you write. The way you write is different to everyone else on Twitter. So go into that. I'm curious about that.
So when I was younger, I would say maybe 10 years ago, I started reading literature by my introductory 3 books that I bought at the bookstore was F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, Ernest Hemingway's Fiesta or Sun Also Rises, his premiere novel, and The Catcher in the Rye. So I really just wanted to read classic lit that they would give to English or American, high school people. I wasn't brought up with that. And before I went to university, I hated reading. I had this classical teacher who wanted to be Homo universalis. For those unindicted, it means the Vitruvian man or the Renaissance man, or basically dumbed down in our corner of Twitter, the train everything man. And he always, how do you call it, like peppered me with those concepts and started to tease me. And I was like, yo, bro, I want nothing of that. I didn't know what I wanted back then. I forgot a little bit about it, but again, something unlocked in me. I knew I had to go to the bookstore. Something unlocked in me. Knew I had to go through this phase of just reading hardcore literature, like hardcore lit. And I was not writing. So there's this saying that I adhere by. It's every writer is a reader, or every writer has been a reader, but not every reader is a writer. Not every reader becomes a writer. It's about expressing and expressing your voice, your authenticity, and your own way of being. And so you would say it's that dichotomy that gets talked on Twitter a lot as well: consumption versus creation, right? But first I was in the acquisition of skills, reading those books, just absorbing, consuming ends on end. And it was only 5 years after that I joined like a writing group, and these guys were a little bit boring, but point is, I started to develop this style to bring it a little bit full circle. Now, I put the book away there, but there's this New York Times bestseller. His name is Lee Child. I talk about him a lot. And he just writes thriller novels of the Jack Reacher character, who has influenced my vagabond kind of lifestyle, the drifter lifestyle. But that's not specific to the topic of writing. What I mean by that is that this guy, as any thriller writer, follows in the footsteps of people like Hemingway and what's his name? I think his name is like Carl V. Higgins of the Eddie Boyle novel. It's pretty niche for those like crime writers who love those kind of stuff. But there were a couple like pillars, I would say, like almost like manifestos of the hard-boiled style. Very like staccato phrases, less modifiers. There's this paucity of modifiers for people who don't know. That's like adjectives, adverbs, but just nouns and verbs, and the gerund, I don't know how you pronounce it properly, but that's like moving, doing. You even start sentences with it, and there's this fluidity and propulsivity to writing that attracted me. Again, that's that explosive side of my nature that I have as a person, and why, when I express myself through the verbal format, would I not write like that? And every time I see a blank page, or like a box to fill in, a tweet, it could be a Google ad, Facebook ads, a mail. I see a blank page. It's like your canvas. You have the choice to either be one of those stupid ghostwriter, copycat, bullshit kind of guys. You can also, what I like to do, you can curate information. You just put it in quotation. It's not yours. Not yours. But you have the opportunity, again, like that Shakespeare quote, you have the opportunity to be uncommon. You have the opportunity to showcase, hey, this is Jack. Hey, this is Fury. You can do whatever you want. And why would I not every single second spend every dying breath, any energy that I have, waste it on somebody else? And I think I made a click like in 2013, 14, 15, like that. The decision that every time I write, the way I would play chess, the way I play life, to create this something that is uncopyable. And that's a little bit my pride, or like a form of like dignity. I do not want it to be able to be copied, because for example, if somebody were to steal a tweet, or especially like these little snippets of stories that I have, if you were to copy paste it in another account, you'd be like, yo, what are you doing? That's Fury, or that's at least not that person. And I made it almost peppered with this signature just to be unique, and just for a prideful point of view. Now, of course, there are different elements to writing. There's funnel page writing, there's copywriting. I get that. And I get the psychology behind it. There's fiction writing, there's non-fiction writing. I understand the dichotomies and the discernment in that. But there are some principles that I adhere to and almost never let go. Almost never like never settling, right? Those standards that I have, every time like I pick up my pen, I mean like the keyboard, I never drop those standards. It's always like, I have to do this. And for, again, coming back to literature background, to those fans of Cormac McCarthy, he has written this book, Blood Meridian, which is, of course, very like Milton, Lost Paradise, or like Dante's Inferno. It's so dense, so archetypical. You could almost say biblical, but it has no religious connotations. But it's merely because of the severity of the topic of life and war and death, and just in your face of these huge messages. But the way he writes, for example, he is one of the only writers in mainstream literature that completely let go of dialogue tags. For, again, those unindicted in the writing world, when you write dialogue, it's like Fury said, comma, and then you open the quotations, then you write what I say. He completely throws that out of the window and makes it such a blob of words, very purposefully, like a almost throwing the ink on the page together to bombard your eye with this, well, this message that he wants to convey in your face, that you have to give it respect. So I would say he paints this canvas in a certain way that you have to give it respect. And just this, like, don't give a fuck about the rules. I very much have that so opportunity now on my mail list and Twitter to attack it like that, you know? So that's a little bit about my writing style, I would say.
Yeah, it's super cool because you can see that, like, you come through, like, you know, I saw a tweet of yours the other day that, you know, made me smile. You know, you've talked a couple of times about train everything, and I like that the way that you realize that is like a dialed down version of, you know, the Renaissance man. That is what the Renaissance man is. I thought that's a very salient point. But
Yeah.
you had the thing like drink scotch like a Scotsman, or drink vodka like a Russian, drink gin like an Englishman, drink everything. And I was like, only Fury could write that tweet, you know. It brought a smile to my face, and it's a good tweet. I can't really retweet it because it doesn't suit my audience, but I appreciated it. It brought a smile to my face. Like, but yeah, it's really good because I think you're right. You mentioned it before. There is a trend on Twitter these days of, it is one of the problems with the monetization aspect of it, which obviously I'm part of. I make my, my business is premised out of it, where there is an almost formulaic end. There is a formulaic element to it to a degree. There are certain tropes that generate engagement. They just do. Unfortunately, it is one of those, you know, don't hate the player, hate the game situations. You know, if people were more discerning and there's more people like us out there that have, you know, enjoy these more intricate or different things. Unfortunately, the people like that are more the minority.
I can tie into that, actually. I can tie slightly into that. So I was reading up on this marketeer. It's just like YouTube videos, you know, like on marketing and stuff like that. And he had a phrase that stuck with me because I have this ego, this pride that I have that sometimes has to be put aside a little bit. And he says, specialize externally, generalize internally. Keep your private whole like Renaissance personality to yourself. Like you said, there's more behind Jack Peach than just relationship, you know, all these things that you enjoy and stuff like that. But people don't have to know that for the business that you're operating, you know, and just put your ego aside and just specialize on some stuff. And that's a little bit what I try to do with the coaching. Just offer something that could have value, you know, to bring a buzzword. Just give value to the client only to help them in a very specific and external way to them. You know, I'm not gonna lecture them on, like, I don't know, like cooking or something that I like to do as well. You know, nobody gives a fuck about that. You know, I'm not a fucking Michelin star chef. You know, so.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's an element of like, people want to share everything on social media now, unfortunately. Like they want to give every part away. And I've always been very intentional of keeping a separation between my Twitter persona and who I am. My Twitter persona is, you know, I use my real name, it's me, but it's only one side of me. Like, I'm not, the only time I've ever really shared any depth about my relationships, my actual relationship or anything, or my personal situation, is with my son lately. And that's because, as I broke down in that thread, I don't want to be hiding something that could be perceived as me being ashamed of it. Like when my life is good, the things that are good about my life, I don't feel like I have to share them. I don't want to share them. They're good. Why do I have to tell the world? Then I'm getting external validation.
It's for you. It's for you.
It's for me, right? But like, when it comes to my son's condition, and like, and there was this transition period where, you know, you are a little bit, you know, I'm a healthy guy. I pride myself on being, you know, trying to lead by example in life, being an unusual guy that can, catch his eyes. That's kind of how I live my life in my own way, right? And when you have a kid who's disabled and you don't, you want the best for your kid, you want them to be healthy. When I went into it, I wanted this kid to be like, want to give them the best opportunities. And if I'm therefore like hiding that and like hiding his condition and acting like, he's a normal kid like any other kid, I mean, he's not. It's just reality. It's kind of hiding from reality out of shame. So that's why I decided to write that thread and share this publicly, because it's a different situation to the things that are good in my life. If I'm keeping the good things hidden, it's because I'm not trying to be valid. I'm not trying to get the validation from other people about these good things.
I'm
They're
extremely careful about that validation.
Yeah.
I have to stop myself, sometimes I have to so you have the, like Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel laureate, says you have the system 1 and system 2. I have to stop the monkey brain from like seeking validation. And if I share something, it's to create more the Fury brand or the Fury vibe or whatever you want to call it. So, okay, I'll share this. And I even have these little tricks that I keep to myself, how I share certain things, and so how they instigate with it. So they can take everything that they want from me and step into these holes of like secrecy and mystery and whatever. But that's part of I don't plan my fucking day, don't get me wrong, but I have to be careful that it doesn't become validational, because I've slipped in those traps myself,
it's easy to do.
Yeah, but huge respect, like sharing that element of like what you just said, like not hiding behind the condition of your son, because I would say it's very cathartic, transformational, and just owning up to yourself, I would say. Because earlier, I think it was the first time you mentioned, it's not a buzzword, but I would say how do I say it? Like you label something or you term it like your son is disabled, So if you were to beat around the bush, you would have phrased it maybe he has a certain condition, and you would keep it a little bit vague and stuff like that. But it's coming to grips for yourself and not for me, for
Absolutely.
the interaction that you have with people. So there's a huge respect and maturity and sageness to that. Yeah.
And even since, like, symbolically, since writing that thread, I do feel like I accepted him more. It was, as you say, cathartic. And it was, even the way that I interact with my son afterwards has changed. It's like, I love him for who he is now, not what I wanted him to be. Right. Yeah. So it's,
what do they always say? The huge poison, or one of the greatest sickness of men, is the woulda, coulda, and the shouldas. Yeah. Especially the focus on that.
For sure. So it was good. It was good to do. I'm glad I did it. And one of the interesting things about it is the people who reached out to me and the people who didn't. You learn a lot about people in that situation as well. That's
true.
Because I guarantee, people on the timeline, they notice these things. So it's interesting. But
it's very interesting. So that everything has a purpose. Actually, that thread that you wrote made me send you a DM for this new year, because you and I don't spar consistently and constantly every day, given our corner of Twitter, blah blah. But everything has a purpose then, because I saw it and it was very humbling. Like, I don't know, that dumb thing that I was going through XYZ day was put in perspective, actually, that everything I do has to be made aware that there's two sides of the same coin, So I might think, oh, Jack is a nice relation coach, he has a nice relationship, but everything has two sides of the same coin. Point being that it was a very humbling perspective to see somebody daring enough to share something like that. And it was like, I had a certain respect for that. That's why we conversed again, and which led to this whole conversation more and furthermore and on and on.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. And, a lot of people reached out to me in that time. I was one of the, both people I knew and people I didn't know as well. I had hundreds of, I'm not gonna say hundreds, but I had, about 50 DMs from people that day, like from, friends, people I've known a long time, people that I've been, mutuals with and never really conversed much with, to absolute strangers who just, people who've gone through something similar, telling me their stories, both publicly in the comments and privately, about their situation. It's, it's also nice to know. I know other people go through it, obviously, but when you get in these things, it's very easy to get lost in your own victim bubble. And like I caught myself doing that on occasions, like playing the victim in the situation. And, part of that thread as well is retaking my retaking control of it and not not letting things act on me, but taking control of it, putting it out there. And this is really, really important for how to live a good life. It's something I teach my clients all the time. There's nothing wrong. Like, you have to take control. Like, ultimately, the biggest definer of someone who's going to be successful in their life is whether or not they take absolute responsibility. Now, there's an element of that can be unhealthy. You can take too much responsibility. You have to have the right mindset to take responsibility, but not get lost in it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I could take responsibility for my son's condition, and therefore, like, it's all my fault and it's terrible, and I can just live my whole life in regret. That's the wrong way of doing it. It's taking responsibility for the situation, and how can I therefore make it better, right? It's not living in the past. It's being aware of the past, living in the present to make the future brighter, right? And it's how you tie these three things together, and it's really, really important.
It brings me the dichotomy between problem-driven thinking and solution-driven thinking. And you see the winners in life, quote unquote winners, or who make success or something of their life, are usually solution-driven people. And that ties back, like ancient Stoic philosophy. But it's hard to do when the chips are on the table. You have to put your money where your mouth word is. And but that's where you become a man, so to say. That's actually the man makers, actually. So yeah,
absolutely, yeah. Especially when it's real, it's like, it's all fun and games to talk about this stuff, like,
yes,
there's a lot of people talking about these things on Twitter, whether they've got their face to it or not, and it's it's hard to see whether people really live up to it, because especially when they don't put their face to things and they don't do things like this, where you can really explore and see how people interact and how people talk about it. It's very easy to write about something. It's not easy to write about something, but it's very easy to write. The whole point of writing is you're trying to give and lead someone through a perspective. That's essentially what writing is. It's to translate one perspective in your brain and lead it into someone else's brain, where they can only almost, like, the best writing is they can only see that perspective, right? You could argue against that, actually. Like, actually, that's not true. But for example, in copywriting, copywriting, that would be the ultimate copywriting. There's only one way of seeing this, and that's what you want them to see.
Yeah, right? You're cornering the prospect.
Yeah, so it's very easy to write these things. It's very different to live them. So yeah, it's that. And for me, that you can see those people in these kind of situations, and also through the consistency of their writing and how they deal with certain situations as well. If you're very, you're a bit more perceptive, is probably the word that I'm looking for. So
I know what you mean. Actually.
Yeah.
I keep those things mostly to myself, but I make a mental note of those things, how people live by something or how they verbalize something. The contrast.
The congruence.
Yeah, the congruency, exactly.
Yeah. So I want to move on. We'll make this the last kind of topic. I want to do a not Perfect. At all smooth segue. You've mentioned it a couple of times, and it's something that I kind of knew you were doing it, but I wasn't fully aware of it. And it's something you've started doing recently, right? And you've moved more into, doing some coaching and helping guys with these kind of things that we've been talking today, giving them the right philosophy, coaching them in their mentality for how to deal with situations, problems, etc. Do you want to just unpack a little bit of that, talk a little bit about that? Because it's something that I don't see you talk a lot about on your Twitter feed. So I was kind of tangentially aware of it. But
I know. So the reason why I don't tweet consistently about it, because the engagement is a little bit shot up there. Point is, I can't talk about it if the engagement is not there. But I posted some like testimonials, get the flow a little bit going. And definitely like top of the funnel is like, of course, from my Twitter, you have my mail list, and people on my mail list know it, and my Telegram, they must know it by now, because where are the clients coming from? They must come from somewhere,
Yeah.
But I was actually inspired by Jack, thanks, Jack. And one of my other good friends, he's on Twitter as well, Niels. We just started talking about like coaching and to make, how do you say, a bigger dent with your Twitter account, some people go maybe like higher tickets even, or bless him, like what's his name, cold email wizard Daniel, he has exploded as like an agency guru almost. I don't have right now the potentiality, the skill set to do something like that, but I did wanted to give back at least to somebody who would assign a certain value to the principles, mentalities, and structuring of life and goal setting and stuff like that. And so I started putting out like, coaching applications like this forum that, and started to rake them in, so to say, in the sense that to see if there was, how do you call it, demand for it, And I noticed there was, though, a theme that I found, especially this, it gets talked a lot about, but not tackled. What I mean by that, this lost aspect of young men, I saw a couple of those things, and I don't want to be per se a relationship coach, and I'm talking then male to female coach. I've also made a disclaimer that I'm not a money Twitter coach, and not a fitness coach. But what I mean by that is that being lost come from the sense of not having a purpose and a mission. And I learned a lot by people like Leon Castillo in the peak performance business, quote unquote business, in the sense that I do some things personally that I feel that were they given to me at a younger age, it would have helped a lot, in my honest opinion. Mm-hmm. And that's what I try to provide. You know what they say, like there's this phrase that you can live by. It's you can coach somebody if you're just one step further away than them. You're, for example, the same with your relationship. I'm not saying you used to be like a huge playboy or something, but you have expertise, you have knowledge, you have insights for your step in your life that might be further down the road of somebody who wants to go down that road, exactly like that. And I find if somebody would come to my road in that sense, I would give them that piece of myself, and I basically give them everything that I know, to give them value. And it could be anything, like for example, I had one client who was struggling with smoking addiction, and we curbed that, and now he sometimes smokes a cigar or something. That's like replacing habits, as James Clear would call it in Atomic Habits. And one guy had troubles sleeping, but so we got to the root of that guy. It can be quite therapeutic or Jungian in the sense of shadow integrating. His sleep issue is not his sleep issue. He was just a chaotic, very impatient young man with a fuck ton of energy, actually, that needs to be channeled in the proper way. And on and on. And I just find these hot takes or these back and forths that I have with my clients sometimes on a slightly more informal fashion and setting, to be told, not like a hardcore coach, I have to give it a name, it's coaching and stuff like that. But I do give them everything in the sense to polish their diamond, to cut the diamond and polish the diamond that they can and intend to be for their step in life where they are.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good. It's I'm happy to hear it. Happy to hear things are going well. And yeah, as you say, it's there's a lot of, the mentor-mentee relationship is as old as time between men. It's traditional. It's something that has been lost in society, and it's something that is very, very valuable in many situations. Definitely. Like traditionally, people would have gone through, like Christians still do, but go through like premarital counseling. With an elder, they'd have people. That's dope. They could go to.
That's smart, actually.
Yeah, me and my wife did it. It's really good. And it's, these kind of experiences, it's not just in that setting. There would traditionally be elders, and they would be out, in the fields, we've been a pre-industrial society. You'd be out with the men, and you'd be out with the older guys working together, and you'd be talking about this stuff and learning from them and taking these lessons. And it's been cut off. We've lost that in our highly atomized society. And this is one of the ways that people can really reconnect to that. In the modern form, it's not the same form, right? But one of the beautiful things about the internet is you can connect to really high achieving, interesting people that maybe you wouldn't have in your geographical location, or meeting them would be so difficult otherwise.
Exactly.
Right? So
it's like a vortex. I call Twitter like a vortex, a maelstrom, like this huge potentiality, like I would have never met you, and
for sure.
And tying it actually a little bit back, how blessed I am. Actually, I was thinking about my journey that, we said we learn things the hard way, but it's the best way. Is that I had some, like issues with some women, like back when I was younger. And because of that, I made the Twitter account, actually. I never forgot that. So coming back to that theme, that there's a season, the duality of life, two sides of the same coin. accepting a situation, moving forward, I would have never gotten to where I am were I not to, accept it at what it is, face value, take control of your narrative and push the story forward. And, it's perfect.
Yeah, that's key. And on that note, let's close it up. Then is
Perfect.
there anything, where can people find you then? If they want to find you, if they want to find more about this Zen samurai that we've got sat before us, where can they find you? Where is your writing? Where are your insights?
So on Twitter and on Telegram, I have the same handle. It's at Hua Fury. Hua you spell with 2 O's and 1 A. From there, you can find, in my bio, my mail list, my coaching application, if it got your, got you all riled up. From there, you will see like my products, some books and info products and stuff like that. And my writing more so, and trying to give value to society, give back. And I have a YouTube channel, also at Hua Fury, where I do these kind of conversations, I would say free flow, cold conversations as well, the Hua podcast. I'm gonna do more of those. I made like a promise of that as well. That's why I took this conversation on as well. I think I'm gonna have a conversation with Eddie Kwan, War on Weakness. I did a podcast this month with him already. I think I maybe have scheduled a call with him later today as well. So, I didn't talk about that, but it's a nice tie to how I am deep down, still a writer and a book kind of guy. That we're going to discuss more writing and books for the sake of that, to give a little bit that old-fashioned charm that people should actually read more kind of fiction books.
Oh yeah, agreed.
The archetypical power of that, the power of narrative, the inspirational side, and that you can see how a story should develop, how I was using my own life as well. I was fed and raised up by that, so it came from books, and people should take heed to that. So I'll be doing more the Eddie and Fury podcast book stuff there. And let me think. Yeah, that's about it, I think. Well, people can send me DMs on Twitter. That's where I am. That's where I met these most influential people on the planet, I would say. There's some pretty because we're changing people on a microcosm and a microcosm at the same time.
Yeah, agreed.
You influence persons with their relationships on the nuclear family, on the microcosm, which is very, what we didn't touch upon that big, but tying into your book, if you tackle the nucleus of society, which are relationships, which what I try to do in real life, but sometimes for deaf's ears, but what I try to at least do with my Twitter account is to make people aware of, live your life your way. And people say, well, I'm a symbol of that, but my point is it's about the interactions. That's where it's at. So if you want to reach me, jump on my mail list or Telegram or, on Twitter, and that's where I am. Oh yeah, I have an Instagram account. It's called at Song of Fury. Song, you're writing a song. I got inspiration by this mythology, the Song of Achilles. And we should all write our personal song, like a poem. Our life should be beautiful, melodic, ups and downs, tragic, but comedic at the same time. So that's where that.
Yeah, and if you want more of this kind of conversation, I've been on Fury's podcast myself. So if you want to hear us talk more about those kind of things he talks about at the end,
definitely
go check that out as well.
Yeah,
he's interviewing me in that one, so it's a different dynamic.
We dive into like femininity and those kinds of stuff,
Exactly. So let's close it out there. I'd like to say thank you very much, everyone, for listening to this conversation. It's been a pleasure for me to partake in it. I knew it would be. I always enjoy having a conversation with you, Fury. So it's been good fun. And guys, obviously, to follow me. I'm on Twitter. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel that this will be posted on. And I'll post up all the links to Fury stuff underneath. There'll also be a little free gift from me if you want to download that and improve your relationships with women as well. That will be linked underneath this in the description box. So till next time, guys, thanks for listening to Preach with Peach.
Thank you very much. Hua.